All right, welcome to the deep dive. You guys asked for this one, and I've got to say I'm actually pretty excited about it too. We're diving into autism and clairaudience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a really fascinating area.
So we're going to be looking at this website called Cheap ABA, which is a website that has resources for people with autism,
Mm.
like ABA therapy and things like that. But they also have some interesting articles that go into some less conventional topics.
Okay.
And this one's about this potential link between autism and clairaudience.
Hmm.
And I just want to make sure everybody is on the same page. So when we say clairaudience, we're talking about hearing inner voices or receiving impressions,
Yeah.
not through your physical ears.
Yeah.
It's like an inner knowing, right?
Yes, it's a way of receiving information that is not through the five traditional senses.
Right. And it's important to to differentiate this from auditory hallucinations,
Yeah.
which are totally different.
Yes, completely different phenomena.
Yeah, very important distinction. So this article suggests that the connection might be from the neurological differences in people with autism, um, particularly heightened sensory processing, a strong focus on detail. And I'm just thinking that like if autistic individuals are already processing information differently, could they also be more tuned into subtle energies, like energy frequencies that could be connected to clairaudience?
It's a really interesting hypothesis because if you think about the brain as like a radio receiver, maybe autistic individuals have their dial set to a wider range of
Like
frequencies.
that.
So they're picking up signals that other people just don't even detect.
That's a really cool analogy. Now, the article also talks about some of the benefits of developing clairaudience,
Mm.
especially for people with autism.
Right.
And they mention things like a sense of guidance,
Mm.
improved emotional regulation, and increased self-awareness, which I think are pretty powerful benefits, especially if you consider some of the challenges that autistic individuals often face.
Definitely. And I think if we break those benefits down a little bit, it gets even more interesting. For example, social situations. We know that social situations can be really tricky sometimes for autistic individuals. So imagine if you had access to this inner guidance, like an intuitive compass to help you navigate those interactions.
Yeah, that would be like incredible.
Right.
Like it would be like having a coach in your ear whispering advice.
Exactly.
And it could really help, just feeling more confident, more comfortable in those
Yeah,
situations.
exactly. And then we think about emotional regulation. We know that a lot of autistic people experience emotions very intensely. So, if through clairaudience they could gain a deeper understanding of their own emotional landscape, that can
Yep.
be incredibly helpful. It's like having an internal barometer
Oh,
to
wow.
help you recognize and manage those intense
Yeah,
feelings.
it's like tapping into this inner strength,
Yeah.
and this inner knowledge that could be super valuable for people with autism.
I think that's a really great point. And that leads into the third benefit of increased self awareness, which for someone on the autism spectrum who might process the world a bit differently, having that direct line to their inner world could be so empowering.
Right. Like it could help them understand their own needs,
Yeah.
advocate for themselves, really live a more fulfilling life. I'm also curious about, like the practical side of this. Like
Hmm.
the article also gives some advice on developing these clairaudient abilities, like, trusting your instincts, practicing mindfulness, meditation, and seeking guidance from experienced practitioners. Do you think these are, helpful for people on the spectrum?
I think they can be, but like anything, I think it's so important to approach these techniques with an awareness of the individual's specific needs and experiences.
Right. Okay. So how would you kind of like adapt these practices for someone on the spectrum? Like where are the challenges and the opportunities there?
Well, I think if we take trusting your instincts, for example, that's generally good advice, but
Mm,
for someone on the spectrum, it's really important to be able to distinguish between genuine intuition and, say, anxieties or fixations. That might be part of their
Oh,
experience.
that's a good point. So it's not just like trust your gut. It's like understand what your gut is telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
And that's where mindfulness and meditation can be really helpful because by creating that quiet inner space, you can start to like differentiate between those different voices within. What's coming from intuition, what's coming from anxiety, what's coming from external influences.
right. And I imagine that could be really important,
Yeah.
especially for people with autism, given, their heightened sensitivities.
Absolutely. It's about fine-tuning that internal radar.
Yeah.
And then seeking guidance from experienced practitioners can also be helpful, especially for those who are, new to exploring these realms. A skilled practitioner can provide that personalized support. and help navigate those nuances.
So it's like finding the right guide, someone who understands, the challenges and the strengths of being on the spectrum
Yeah.
and can help, cultivate those intuitive skills in a safe environment.
Exactly. And, we've been talking about the potential benefits and techniques for developing clairaudience, but, it's important to remember this is just one facet of this broader context of autism and spirituality.
Right. And the Cheap ABA website actually highlights this too. They have a whole list of resources for exploring this connection further,
Right.
which I think is just a good reminder that, you know, the autistic community is so diverse.
Yeah.
And there's no one-size-fits-all approach to spirituality.
Absolutely. This connection with clairaudience is just one possibility within a huge spectrum of, spiritual beliefs and experiences.
And I think ultimately, whether or not you embrace the concept of clairaudience, there's this universal truth that we can all relate to.
Yeah.
And it's the importance of, tuning into our inner voice, our intuition, our own unique way of experiencing the world.
I love that. That's beautiful. I think it's important to acknowledge that this idea of autism and clairaudience, being linked, it might be met with some skepticism.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely outside of, you know, mainstream thinking about autism.
For sure.
So how do we, like, approach this with a healthy dose of, open-mindedness and critical thinking? Like, what are some things to consider when, evaluating these experiences?
Well, I think one key factor is consistency. Are these experiences happening regularly? Or are they just kind of like isolated incidents? Is there a pattern to them? Or do they seem random and unconnected?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine the content of the experiences matters too, right? Like, what are these inner voices or impressions saying?
Exactly. Are they positive? Are they supportive?
Yeah.
Are they offering guidance and encouragement? Or are they negative and distressing, causing fear or anxiety?
So, I mean, if someone's hearing voices that are, like, causing them distress, that's a red flag, right?
Absolutely. In those cases, seeking professional help from a qualified mental health professional is essential. It's crucial to, rule out any underlying mental health conditions that might be contributing to those experiences.
Right, and even if the voices aren't, like, distressing, it's probably still a good idea to talk to someone.
Right.
Or, like, get another perspective, maybe some guidance on how to, like, navigate these waters.
Definitely. Whether it's a therapist or a spiritual advisor, a trusted friend or family member, having someone to talk to can be so valuable. It can help you make sense of what you're experiencing and provide support and validation.
For sure. I think it's also important to emphasize, like, that developing clairaudience
Yeah.
or any intuitive ability, it's a process, right? It's not like a light switch.
Yeah.
You don't just suddenly become psychic.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah.
A journey of self-discovery. It's about learning to listen to that inner voice, trust your intuition, and discern the subtle energies and patterns that are all around us.
Yeah, like any skill, it takes practice, right?
Right.
The more you kind of engage with those subtle realms, the more attuned you become.
Exactly. It's not about passively waiting for those intuitive insights. It's about actively cultivating them, honing those skills, and developing a deeper awareness of your inner world.
Right. And speaking of that inner world, we've talked about clairaudience in a general sense, but how might this be different for someone on the spectrum? Like, what unique challenges or opportunities might they face?
That's where things get even more interesting. Those neurological differences we talked about, the heightened sensory sensitivities, the attention to detail, the unique ways of processing information, all of that could potentially contribute to a heightened awareness of subtle energies and intuitive insights.
It's like those characteristics that, in some contexts, might be seen as challenges, could actually be strengths when it comes to clairaudience.
Exactly. It's all about perspective.
Right.
What might be perceived as a deficit in one realm could be a gift in another.
I love that. It's a good reminder that, like, neurodiversity isn't about, like, deficits or disorders. It's about different ways of being, different ways of perceiving, different ways of knowing, and embracing those differences can, open up all these new possibilities, especially when exploring realms beyond, what we typically think of.
Absolutely. Have you ever wondered, though, like, if this connection between autism and clairaudience is so real, why haven't we heard more about it?
Yeah, I have, actually. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, one reason could be, clairaudience and anything, psychic is often stigmatized, even in today's world, right?
Yeah.
So people might be hesitant to talk about these experiences for fear of being judged
Yeah.
or dismissed or even ridiculed.
Right, and I imagine that stigma could be like
Mhm.
even more pronounced for someone on the autism spectrum,
Mhm.
where there's already, this pressure to conform.
Yeah, for sure. And then, these experiences can be really subtle, difficult to articulate. It's not always, as clear as seeing a ghost
Yeah.
or having like a precognitive dream. It's often more like a whisper, a feeling, a fleeting intuition
Yeah.
that's hard to grasp.
So it might be hard to even recognize it as, out of the ordinary,
Right.
let alone of something worth sharing.
Exactly.
And even if you want to share it, like finding the language to describe it can be tough.
Yes, absolutely. And we can't forget about the lack of scientific research.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
There's just not a lot of data on clairaudience, let alone its potential connection to autism.
So while, anecdotal evidence and personal experiences can be really compelling,
Yeah.
we do need, more research to explore these possibilities.
We do. And I think that lack of research is also a reminder that we're still really early in our understanding of, human consciousness
Mhm.
and the different ways that we experience the world.
It makes me think about, what you were saying earlier about, like, the importance of curiosity. Like, even though we don't have the concrete answers, the pursuit of knowledge, especially in these, like, less explored areas, it's still a worthwhile endeavor.
Absolutely. Curiosity is what fuels all the great discoveries, right?
Yeah.
And who knows what we might uncover when we approach these mysteries with, an open mind and a willingness to kind of challenge what we think we know.
Well said. Um, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but I also feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
I agree.
So for everyone listening, I encourage you to keep an open mind, stay curious, and trust your own intuitive journey.
Yes, and remember, you are not alone on this path. There are others who have had similar experiences, and there are resources available to support you.
And before we, wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm going to leave you with a question. So imagine for a moment that this connection between autism and clairaudience is real and more common than we realize. What implications might that have for how we understand and support autistic individuals?
Wow, that's a really powerful question. And I think it really challenges us to, expand our understanding of autism, to move beyond the traditional medical model and really embrace the possibility of different ways of knowing and being in the world.
And it also challenges us to listen more deeply
Mm-hmm.
to the voices of autistic individuals, honor their unique perspectives, and create spaces where they can, explore their gifts and their potential without fear of judgment.
Absolutely. And who knows what we might discover when we do
Maybe
know.
new pathways for communication and understanding
Yeah.
and human connection.
I like-
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some practical advice for anyone who's interested in exploring their own intuitive abilities, whether or not they identify as autistic. So stay tuned. Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. So we've been talking about this potential connection between autism and clairaudience, and looking at it from different angles,
Yeah.
like scientific and spiritual, and the challenges and opportunities that come with it. Now, before we wrap up, I'd love to just kind of shift gears a bit and offer some practical advice for anyone listening who's maybe intrigued by the idea of exploring their own intuition.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because intuition is something we all have, and it's a skill that can be developed.
Right, exactly. So where do we even begin? Like, what are some first steps that someone can take to, start tapping into that inner wisdom?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental things is just becoming more aware of your own thoughts and feelings and your bodily sensations. Because often our intuition speaks to us through these subtle cues that we might miss if we're not paying attention.
So it's about cultivating mindfulness,
Yes.
really tuning into those whispers
Yeah.
of your inner world.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of paying attention to your dreams.
Oh yeah.
Because dreams can offer incredible insights into our subconscious, and they can be a really rich source of intuitive guidance.
That makes me think about journaling, keeping a dream journal.
Oh, absolutely. Writing down your dreams as soon as you wake up can help you capture those fleeting images and emotions before they disappear. And over time, you might start to notice recurring themes or symbols that have a special meaning for you.
Yeah, it's like creating a map of your own inner landscape. So what about meditation? Is that a useful tool for this kind of work?
Meditation can be incredibly powerful because when you calm the mind and quiet all that mental chatter, you create space for your intuition to emerge more clearly.
So it's like, clearing the static from a radio signal
Exactly.
so you can tune in more clearly.
Yeah, and for those who are new to meditation, there are so many different techniques out there, but one of the simplest and most effective is just focusing on your breath as you breathe in and out. Notice the rise and fall of your chest, the gentle flow of air.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It can really help anchor you in the present moment and
Yeah.
quiet those racing thoughts.
Sounds so peaceful.
It is, and it's something that anyone can do, anytime, anywhere.
Right. I think it's important to remember that intuition isn't always about like these big dramatic revelations.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just those subtle nudges.
Yeah, those gut feelings
Yeah.
that guide us in our everyday life.
It's like that little voice that says, take a different road home. And then you find out there was an accident on your usual way.
Exactly, or that feeling of hesitation before you make a big decision. That prompts you to, pause and reconsider.
Learning to trust those little cues can make such a difference
It really can. It's like having that internal compass guiding you toward what feels right.
toward what's aligned with your true self.
Exactly. And remember, developing intuition is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
So, there will be times when you doubt yourself, when you question your perceptions, when you feel lost or uncertain.
Yeah, for sure.
But don't give up. Just trust the process and keep practicing.
It's about embracing those moments of doubt
Yeah,
as part of the journey.
exactly. They can be really valuable learning experiences.
Yeah, totally.
And remember, you're not alone on this path. There are tons of resources available. Books, workshops, online communities, even mentors who can support you on your journey.
So for those listening who are feeling inspired to explore their intuition, be patient, trust the process, and embrace the adventure. And if you're an autistic individual and you're resonating with what we've been talking about today, your unique way of experiencing the world could be a real asset on this journey of self-discovery.
I love that. The world needs your unique perspective and your intuitive gifts.
So on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
I want to thank you for joining us today on the deep dive. And to all our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep trusting your own inner wisdom. Till next time, stay curious.